Hello, class. We are really ripping through this book, right? We are now on chapter 16, Organizational Culture. And while you may be wondering the importance of such a topic, you'll kind of see some things that are really the foundation of why we're going through all these things in this book. The culture is really a key component of your experience in an organization. And as we go through the things, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. If you look on page 527, the question is asked, what is organizational culture? Why is it important? They give a definition of it. Notice that there are some characteristics of it that are listed there on the page, and they really help you to understand what's involved in a culture of an organization. As we look on, go to page 528, you'll see different types of cultures. There are dominant cultures, there are subcultures, there are core values. Think about the things that are important to the organization that you work for. This is their core values or what they represent. Honesty, integrity, things that really make you feel confident and proud to work in this type of organization. On page 529, a strong culture. There's a discussion of strong versus weak cultures. Sometimes there's a culture that dominates over the one that really should be there. So think, for example, if there's a negative culture, it could dominate the culture of being positive and working hard and getting the job done and focusing on the organization as well as your own goals. So you can see that sometimes things come into play there. If we look at page 530, you'll see there's a cultural climate, the organizational climate. Think about the climate as being more related to individual employees rather than the culture of the organization. It's important to remember that these two things can be different. There could be a wonderful culture in the organization that really supports employees and works with them and supports them and focuses on their growth and independence as employees, their contributions. But there could be an organizational climate that can be different. It can be on a certain team, a certain department, could be because of something that happens. So think about an organization that has a really great culture, and then they lay 700 people off, which is what happened to me. It totally changes the climate of the organization. So even though the culture is still there, the climate is, am I next? What's going to happen to me? When am I going to get laid off? So that feeling of insecurity is part of the climate, even though the culture, is supposed to be very supportive. So just to give you an idea on the differences between those two. There's also an ethical work climate, if you look on page 531, and that's simply knowing the right and wrong behavior in the workplace. So you could say, well, I come to work every day and I do what I'm supposed to do, but are you stealing time? Are you stealing supplies? Stealing is a strong word. People don't like to hear it, but the organization loses more opportunity cost from employees, an actual cost really, from employees that don't do their job. So wherever you work, you have to set yourself up as a person of integrity who says, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm not making what I should make, but that doesn't change who I am. In other words, don't be ethical when you think you make enough money, because here's a revelation, you'll never make enough money. But your reputation will precede you, regardless of where you go in an organization or in your career. Once you are known as a person who has integrity, who stands up for what's right, who doesn't try to cheat people, and we can cheat people by trying to steal their work. You've probably worked with people, if you haven't, that's wonderful, who will take your ideas and run with them as if they're their own. So those kinds of things are what are making a difference as far as the ethical dimension. Let's look on page 532, sustainability. It's great to have a certain culture in an organization, but how long can the organization sustain it? In other words, keep it going. So how do you keep employees happy, motivated, whatever the case is, when the company's going through turbulence of some sort? As I mentioned earlier, layoffs, downsizing, structural changes, departmental changes, people are let go, people are replaced, things are happening. It's really hard to sustain a culture when the organization's culture itself becomes volatile or activities that are being involved in the organization make it seem volatile. If we look at institutionalization on page 535, this is where you get to the point of, as a company, being valued for what you do rather than who you are. This is part of institutionalization. Just think about our government. If you look at any kind of government entity, this is why they call them an institution. Because you notice in the book it says it becomes valued for itself and not its good or services that it produces. And this is pretty much the way any, like I said, governmental entity, that's how they become an institution, and that's how their value is more important for who they are rather than what they can give us. I don't think you think the IRS is giving you anything, right? There's a perfect example of an institution. Ooh, that was my out loud voice. Okay. Creating and sustaining culture on 537. How does a culture begin? How do we keep it alive? I'm sorry, too, I skipped 536. Look also as barriers to changing the culture once it is institutionalized. What kind of barriers are there to diversity? How do we... Excuse me. Dry throat here, sorry. How do we strengthen any dysfunctions that are in the organization? As I said earlier, how does a culture start? How do we keep it alive? What can we do as employees to make sure that the culture that we are enjoying and thriving in stays the way it needs to be? It's a challenge. It really is. Socialization on 538. Think about the fact that when you join a new organization, you don't know the culture. You don't know what's going on with it. You're not aware of anything yet, but there's a socialization process that occurs without you even knowing it. And the first step in that is what? What do you think? Employee orientation. This is when they ramble at you for a whole day to help you to understand what you need to do as a member of that organization. That is socialization, and that is part of the process to ensure that you are aware of the culture of the organization, what's expected of you, what will happen if you do or don't do something. All those kinds of things come into play. On page 539, and I think this is important, I always enjoy talking about this, because there's a socialization model that they show, Exhibit 16.2, and you'll see there's 3 stages that they talk about as far as this socialization. So think about it when you first start in an organization, even before so, you're applying for the job, you're going through the interview, you're doing everything you need to do. And so based on what you've seen and who you've spoken to so far, you have a certain perception of how the organization is, and that's the pre-arrival stage. Then the encounter stage is when you actually start the job, and you start to run into people, and you start to talk to people, and you start, excuse me, to get involved in activities in the organization. There may be some changes. You may look at this and say, okay, this organization is not what I thought it was, but I've got to work through this. That's the encounter stage. Then the metamorphosis stage is where you say, okay, I understand what the challenges are, but this is where I am. They're giving me a paycheck. I'm making good money, or I'm not, but whatever the case is, they hired me. I have this job. I have to do my very best. And this is what they call the metamorphosis stage. So in other words, you don't buck the system. You don't try and change anything. You just say, hey, It is what it is. You've heard this before, right? And I have to make the very best of it that I can. So those are the 3 stages in that socialization process. I'll be talking about those. Look at the exhibit 16.3 on page 540, the different options of socialization. We'll be talking about those. And how do employees learn about the culture of an organization? This starts on page 541. One of those is through stories, things that happen in the organization that are handed down through time so that new employees come in and they tell the stories. One place I worked at, for example, we were told that the CEO of the company, if he found out that a person wanted to leave the company, he would call them personally to ask them why they wanted to leave. And it wasn't necessarily to keep them, it was to find out if there was something they were doing wrong, what do we need to correct, how do we need to do this, and so on. Another way that employees learn culture is rituals. We'll talk about those. And if you turn to 542, you'll see symbols. There are material symbols. So think about things that you get in an organization, such as an Employee Service of the Month, Employee of the Month award, excuse me, a plaque after working so many years, a luncheon for, and these are things that I've experienced, every 5, 10, 15, and 20 years. Those kinds of things make a difference. So these are symbols that help to project and ensure that that culture is really integrated into every single employee's activities. Influencing the culture on page 544, an ethical culture. We'll talk about that. Also a positive culture on 545. A spiritual culture, which really has nothing to do with religion, so don't get excited. No one's trying to press religion to you. But you know, spirituality and religion are 2 different things. So being aware of that part of you that is different than what's sitting in that chair, and having an understanding, we're all on the same path together. We all have to get through life. No one gets out alive. So helping each other, working with each other, having a sense of peace at what you're doing. These are important because these are a lot of the things that, if they're not in place, can cause stress. And this is why the book is bringing it up. And we'll talk about in the organization how this is presented. That's on page 547. Of course, people criticize it. Is workplace spirituality religion? Like I said, no, it's about doing the right thing, supporting each other. Having a sense of understanding that it's important that you do your very best when you work at the organization. It's those kinds of things. And that is pretty much the end of it. That's chapter 16. I'll be going through it in person on Tuesday. Those of you that are in the online class, please review the echo recording, and that'll help you do the match game and the other assignments. Our final exam is coming up pretty quickly, so please be taking your notes, getting that 1-page sheet ready, front and back. For those of you that are online, the exam will be in Respondus, and we'll be talking about dates and stuff like that. As far as the on-site class, it will be Tuesday, I take that back. It will be on May 1st, because April 24th is a study day. So those of you that are online will probably have that extra week as well to go through and review everything, because we're not allowed to give exams on April 24th. So I'm not going to make the online group take it before the on-site group. So look for your final exam to be that week of May 1st. May 1st, I believe, is Tuesday. But we'll coordinate. I'll let you know what's going on. We've got a couple more weeks left. Please send me emails. I'm going through those today. I've responded to a few that I got regarding your topic. So please look at the paper sample. I've been going through this every week so that no one can say, I didn't understand, I didn't know what to do. Everything is out there. Please let me know if you have questions. I want everyone to do well. Okay? That's it for now, and I will see you in the coming week, one way or the other. At least you'll be hearing me. Talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.